Good morning. Hey, there's been some interest in this old 62 candy apple red Strat of mine. And this really was my go-to guitar when I was gigging. This is the one that I played the most, and people wonder why I don't play it. Well, right now I've got it set up with 1046, 10 through 46, and I got so used to that light Hendrix gauge, and since I'm doing mostly Hendrix, I only play this one just when I want to, feel it and hear it. But yesterday I pulled it out and started playing it, and I said, the reason this thing sounds like it does is because of the original block. I said, that Mark Foley block sounds almost exactly like this guitar. I could just feel the solidness and the volume that this guitar puts out. But I'll go over it. I'm going to go over a few of my gripes with the Callaham block over here that I've mentioned to a few people on my last video. Why they changed designs, I don't know, but I think it can cause problems. But what I'm going to do to squeeze the last little drop of tone out of this thing is we're going to take the block off. I'm going to scrape the paint off like I said in the last video, and I'm also going to check the plate block fit. And I don't know if I've ever taken the block off of this thing, but let's look at this thing in detail a little bit. I've still got the vintage saddles on it. I left them on. Now, as they say, this guitar has a lot of explaining to do. Don't get me going on it. Maybe some experts out there might be able to figure something out, but I've taken it to an expert and they were puzzled. Either way, it's got a 62 neck, but then it's got what they call a transition logo, and you can see that crazy checking on there. It was speculated that this was a factory refin, which I'm not sure exactly why they would do that back in the days, but I guess they really wanted some pretty guitars and somebody decided that it was scratched up. I have no clue. But when they refinished this thing, they put a lot of coats on this. I mean, at least 8, and I'll show you. I call it the jawbreaker. Anyway, it's got a 62 neck, but then all the pickups and the electronics, pots and everything are 1966. So you tell me. I have no clue. All I know is it's a great guitar and I'll never sell it. I spent this morning looking for the original whammy bar. I know it's in this house somewhere, but I couldn't find it. This one apparently is stainless steel. The old whammy bars are kind of junky. They're always rusted or something, so that one's nice. And let's turn it over. Here's the original block. And people are saying, well, it'd be nice if you could compare those Mark Foley blocks with an original block. Well, I just did. This, I'm assuming, is a 62. It's got the deeper holes and everything. And I forgot what the serial number checks out to be, but I don't know if the serial number even comes out to a date that makes sense. But then it turns out you can get plates and put any kind of serial number you want on there, but that looks like the original plate. But look at this finish. This is why I call it the jawbreaker. I counted it once. I know it's got at least 8, but I may have counted 12 layers between the red and the gold base. And so it's a very interesting guitar. And it's got the kind of the vertical checking instead of the horizontal checking that you see most of the time. And the neck is really nice. It's perfect fit. Got the original tuners. But super guitar. So let's take the block out and change strings, put some new Kirk Mangan round core 1046 on there. Well, let's get to it. Okay, here's my Callaham block rant. And I've been kind of not real pleased with any of the Callaham stuff because he always wants to change everything. Why change the stuff that's a perfect design from the very beginning? But this was one thing, and I think this is the only Callaham block I have. But the bullets just really sit in there wonky. And they usually are all tilted like that. Because even the holes inside aren't, the bevel down inside isn't even as thick. I guess you would say that he bored out the string holes a lot more than a regular block, but we'll compare that to the original block I pull off here in a minute. Let's see, these things just all sit there. And if you're doing some whammy barring, you know, it might cause it to go out of tune because these things are going to be moving around. They're supposed to sit in that bevel nicely. So that's one complaint, not my biggest. The biggest complaint was this. These bevels right here. And let me pull the other block off and I'll show you that no other block has those big, huge bevels. Okay, here's the original block. I checked the fit, and it's usually hard to see on this camera, but there's no light between the plate and the block, so that's great. You can see most of the paint is already off of the block. So I don't know if I'm going to really be able to. There's a little bit of paint on there that I'll be able to get off. Talk about the last drop of tone. I'm hoping I don't think it's going to make a whole bunch of difference just because this thing hardly has any paint on it anyway. But yeah, nice fit. I got to take these saddles off so I can take it apart and we'll compare to the Callaham. Yeah, let's look at the cavity a little bit too. Needs to be cleaned up. Probably leftover lube here and there, a little chip paint. We're going to fix that up though. Hey, just a tip too. If you ever get a saddle or a string that seems to go constantly flat and you can't figure out why, you think it's stretching, well, it's really these screws are loose and they'll vibrate to where the saddle will slowly drop down. And I made a comment on the Strat forum yesterday. Somebody was asking about that, and I said I had that problem a long time ago. You buy this Loctite blue 242 removable thread lock. Some people use fingernail polish, but this is what it's made for. Put that on there and those screws will stop moving. Just a quick tip. Okay, here's one gripe I have. Here are the blocks lined up perfectly with a screw, with the mounting screws screwed in, just barely, one, not even a thread, just so that it won't fall out. And you can see how much thread you get on the original block right here, and the one behind it, how much thread you lose. See how far down the threads go before you even get to a thread because of that bevel? So you're really not even using maybe 2/3 of the screw threads on the Callaham block. I don't know why you would put that bevel there. And what really got me going was when my vintage 64 plate didn't fit flush with the new Mark Foley block, I speculated that it was those bevels and that caused the problem. If you look, see the bevel? It's bigger than the mounting hole ID. So I was thinking that when you put these screws in there and you tighten them up real tight, that you could actually protrude that metal around the base of the plate right here, just the very ring. And that's exactly what I saw on my 64 plate, were just these little rings there. And so I put my 64 plate back on the Callaham block and it fit flush, no gaps. But when I put it on my my Mark Foley, which is made like a vintage block with very little bevel, it wouldn't fit flush. So I think those could cause a problem. I know that, the screw fits really nicely. Well, the screw fits in the bevel of the plate really nicely, and that probably supports it a lot. But just not having support under that plate when you torque these things up, I'm saying could actually warp or bend the plate a little bit. Either way, be careful. Just get you a Mark Foley block. I know if I were to watch this video, I'd have to have that Mark Foley block. And I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean for that to happen, but I'm telling you, the Mark Foley is so close to this that it's a no-brainer for me anymore. I've got the left-handed block for my left-handed Nash Strat on order. Haven't heard from Mark yet. I'm assuming he's getting it built. And I think, on the first video, I talked about mass and weight. Speaking of that, let's weigh this one. Oh, shoot. Hold on. I got to go get my scale. But either way, it's not just mass. It's the hardness of the steel. The old steel was just softer. And Callaham makes everything too hard, including his saddles, which makes everything real bright and, like they say, pingy zingy sounding. I think that's because of the hardness of the steel that he uses. And some of it may be environmental regulations now. You know how they won't let you use certain compounds anymore because they cause cancer in California? Well, I have a feeling they probably stopped the use of some additives to the steel compound from the 60s and the 50s, which affected the way the steel hardens or something. I don't know. I'm not a metallurgist, but either way, let me go get my scale and we'll see what it weighs. All right, here's the vintage block off my 62, and I'm pretty sure it's a 62 block. It's just the design of it, but almost 280, the sweet spot. But this is a softer steel, and it sounds different. Now here's the Callaham. It's maybe a gram less, and just hard as a rock, If you were to test the hardness of these things, you could be sure the vintage one is softer, and that's what makes the Strats sound the way they did back then. All right, well, let's scrape some paint. All right, I think there's a little more paint on there than I originally thought. So this is how I'm squeezing that extra drop of tone out. No more of this tone stifling paint. And like I said, it's so thin that I don't know if it's gonna make a difference, but we'll be sure it doesn't. And I'm not sure why this is worn off right here like it is. It's kind of interesting. Alright, well let me get this done and I'll come back in a few minutes. Well, I'm making progress. This stuff is not easy to get off, but there's that extra drop of tone right there. That's it. Get that off of there. I'm going to clean everything else up. And, you know, it's just amazing how critical this big old hunk of steel is to the total sound of a Strat, because it's the biggest mass on the whole guitar except for the body, and it's just like it's like a bell. If you don't have a good sounding bell, it's not going to sound as good. I mean, most guitars don't rely on this thing, or none of them do except the Strat, so it's a very critical component to the Strat sound. I had to use a little bit of acetone because it's hard to get out of the crooks and crannies, but I wanted to compare the idea of the string holes. Can you see? The Callahams are just a hair bigger, so that makes for less of a shoulder for the string ball to sit on. You can see it more on this view. See how the Callaham string holes are bigger. So, you know, I'd rather have that ball sitting on a little more solid ground. All right, let's put this thing back together. Oh, I did clean the plate up nicely. Got all the gunk out of there from years of trying to lube this thing. But I'm going to put the grease in there, and that's it. Oh, I need to clean the screws too. All right, I've been fighting that little air gap, and I got it out of there. I had to sand a little burr on the whammy bar hole, and I'm not sure exactly if I caused that or if it was already there, but I don't know. Either way, we had discussed that. The air gap's probably not too critical. It's just for me, I want this to be flush, no light. You know, usually it shows up in between the screws. I got it down. I had to sand that little burr down a little bit. But so it's not super critical. You know, if you're OCD like me, you'll make sure it's not there. But some websites suggest that you put the whammy bar in first before you tighten these screws up so that this stays aligned. But I'm not so sure that's a necessary or a great idea. The first time I did it that way, and I ended up with the gap. So the second time, after I got that burr off of there, I tightened these up first and then put the whammy bar in there. It still lines up. It's still screwed in the same. So, like I said, it's up to you, but no air gap. See if it sounds better in some of my next videos. Hey, just one other tip I kind of figured out. You know how when you put these things on and the springs will kind of sometimes make the saddle want to kick out to the outside a little bit? Well, you can turn those springs. I just took these little needle nose pliers and turned them a little bit. And you can direct which way that saddle is going to lean, I guess. Just a tip. All right, all done. Like I said, I probably wasn't going to see a big improvement because most of the paint was off of that block anyway. Still got to set the intonation. Brand new Kurt Mangan strings. I do go, even though it's 10 to 46, I still change this to a 15. I'm just used to that now. It definitely feels better. All right, I'll talk to you guys later.